when we talk about boundaries, we're not saying here's how you keep yourself in a bubble and away from anything that could ever hurt you. If we overprotect something, it loops around and now we're not protecting it at all. It's fragile and anything can break it. Boundaries are not things that are intended to keep us safe forever and never experience anything harsh in the world, because that's really not possible. It's, are you making sure that if something hurts you, it's not devastating you to a point where you can't move on? Boundaries are there to give us clues as to when something's encroaching.
Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So, Antonia, I want to talk about boundaries this week. Boundaries is a big issue. Sometimes in our personality life path mentorship, people get really angry. And every time somebody gets angry, I'm like, that's a boundary issue. Not always, but often anger tells us we have boundary crosses. We have a lot of people, I think, that have a lot of questions about setting good and proper boundaries. Some people set boundaries too rigidly. They keep people out. They kind of block people out. I don't know if you're like this or not. Maybe as you're listening, you're one of these people that's a little too rigid with your boundaries. You have too many up. Other people have no boundaries at all. They let people just walk all over them or come right in their life, or they don't have a sense of themselves. They just let everybody take what they want. They don't have any sense of boundaries around their life. So, and there's rest of us kind of in the middle somewhere, I think. Yeah. So I would love to know, if you're listening or watching right now, right as we start out, where do you place yourself on the boundary framework? Are you a person that you think you've got really good boundaries in life? Do you think you've set up boundaries that are appropriate for you? Do you think you have weak boundaries and people tend to take too much and tread on your sovereignty? Or do you have really rigid boundaries and maybe no one gets in? You're impenetrable. Like right. you have maybe no friends. I don't know. But you probably have people you get along with, but you just have really rigid boundaries maybe you learned over time. I'd love to hear in the comments, whatever platform you're on, leave a comment. Where are your boundaries set currently in your life?
I suspect that boundary setting is one of the best gifts that we can give to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think we should start with a good working definition of what boundaries are.
Yes.
So a boundary is basically anything that's yours to manage, and creating a distinction between what's yours, what's your responsibility, what are the things that are yours to figure out, and anything that isn't. So it's creating a distinction between what's mine and what is everybody else's.
The word domain comes to mind for me. Would you say that we could say that's my domain? Like it's my area that I feel, because it's maybe not responsibility, but it's definitely territory of some sort.
Yeah. Well, you're protecting something.
Yeah.
Right. And responsibilities are something that you should also protect.
Of course.
But yes, I don't think it's just responsibilities. It's like, what is mine to protect and what isn't? And so when somebody encroaches on something that is yours to protect, then if we have good boundaries, we'll acknowledge that even if the person doesn't have bad intent, and even if they're not trying to hurt something, this is our sanctum. Right? They've entered an inner sanctum, and it's our job to make sure that we communicate in whatever way that we need to, that you've now officially walked onto inner sanctum turf. You've walked into a turf that's mine to protect. So I'm going to be very careful about who I'm going to let in there and not let in.
Yeah.
And so boundary setting is it's basically who we are and how we're going to keep other people from encroaching on that space. But I think what's interesting about boundary setting is that we also have to do it with ourselves.
Oh.
Because we'll also play fast and loose with our own inner sanctum.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if there's a space for us to protect, we assume that other people are the things that are the threats to that. But sometimes we're our own threat.
Oh man, you hit real close to home. I immediately identified like time management for me. Like I lie to myself. I don't have good boundaries. I say, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do this in these hours. And I'm like, I don't really feel like doing it now. I'll do it later this afternoon or evening. And then I get stressed out. I mean, I get the thing accomplished. I had poor boundaries with myself. I didn't say no to myself when I didn't feel like it. I just said, well, that's what you decided. I mean, within reason. I'm not going to like just grind myself out. If I need rest, obviously take rest. But I'm saying, those times, you know what I'm talking about when you're listening or watching. I'm not saying push through and hurt yourself, but you can do it, but you just decide not to. That's kind of what you're talking about, Antonia.
Yeah. Or how we talk to ourselves.
Yes.
Or
negative self-talk.
Or what we allow ourselves to do and not do. I mean, I think to some extent, perfectionism is an example of poor boundary setting with ourselves.
Wow.
Like we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes, which is the part of ourselves that we're trying to, like, we think that we're pushing ourselves to excel, but really usually what we're doing is we're doing it at the cost of another part of ourselves. And we're setting unreasonable expectations, in fact, impossible expectations. And so the parts of ourselves we're trying to protect end up becoming like sort of, targets for missiles, internal missiles towards ourselves, because we're never going to make it. We're just never going to hit those perfect ideals.
Yeah.
And so that's one way. Time management's another way. There's actually a lot of different ways where we cross our own boundaries. And that usually ends up creating a lack of self-trust, or it ends up creating, like a demoralization or whatever. So boundary setting, we could think of it as both setting boundaries for the external world, but also setting boundaries for the internal world.
I think most people, when they think of boundaries in a general topic, they almost always, not almost always, I think people often put it down in terms of relationships. Like when we have these conversations, it's almost always had in the realm of relationships, but we're extending that outside of just relationships. It's relationship with others and ourselves, but also there's other, like with mine, I guess it's relationship with myself, but it's also my relationship with time, or my attunement to time, or responsibility.
Yeah. So
there's more here than just letting people say something to you that's mean, or letting that person, borrow sugar, your neighbor borrow sugar, and not, like it's an imbalance or something, and never returning the favor or something. It's beyond just those small things in a relationship.
Yes, there are physical boundaries, there are emotional boundaries, there are cognitive boundaries, and I would argue there's existential boundaries.
And we know by personality type that each person's going to have a better time of setting some of those than others based on their personality wiring. That's why personality types help so much, is we can go, oh, well, a lot of those people that are talking about relationship boundaries, those are probably a lot of FJ personality types, because that's what they're occupied with, right? There's a lot of questions about where, because it's always negotiated all the time. It's never like a clear line. It's kind of a fluid negotiation as you move through life. So a lot of the conversations gets occupied there, and that personality type certainly has material there, has questions there, has some good advice there. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example. And that's often where I hear boundary conversations. Yeah,
but I want to piggyback on what you just said, which is that boundaries are fluid. And I know you're talking about relational boundaries, but I think that's one of the most important aspects to remember as we're trying to set this conversation in our side, inside of ourselves, is to remember that setting good boundaries is actually a moving target. It doesn't stay the same throughout our life. It's based on our capacities. It's based on our capabilities of what we can and cannot handle. It's what needs to be protected. And if we're in a time period of, say, healing, if we've had traumas from the past and we're working on healing, we might be more boundaried than at other times in our life. We might have more to protect because parts of ourselves are in a healing process, so we can't have too much press against them. We can't have too much pressure put through the pipes in those moments because we're already trying to allow something to heal. So if we're in a time period of healing, we're probably going to be more boundaried or have smaller boundaries, or tighter ones rather, than normal. But if we're in a time period of reaching out or transcendence, our boundaries actually might expand because we're letting go of a previous iteration of ourselves and we're stepping into the next iteration, and that person might have a different set of boundaries, even in the same topics. And so the challenge with boundaries is that we have to figure out what our boundaries are now. Right now in the iteration of the person that I am in, and then recognize that it might be different now than it was when we were younger. We might have had more space when we were younger, or it might be different in the future. Like we might end up having more space in the future. So that's the challenge with it, is that it's not a set and forget situation. Boundaries are something that we have to attune to on a regular basis and make sure that our boundaries are holding the way that we need them to for that moment in the timeline.
So could we create, Antonia, do you think, a heuristic around this, maybe categorical, where we could kind of slice into some of the categories and then people could take their personality type and start to identify with those? Or how do we want to approach this today?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways you can slice and dice boundaries. You can just, even if you don't know type, you can figure out boundaries and then assert them. But what makes type helpful is that it points out things that might be idiosyncrasies of how we're pre-wired to watch out for. And so even though all of us need to have good boundaries in all aspects of our lives, that's hard to do. Like we said, it's a moving target. It changes and alters depending upon where we're at in the timeline of our growth and development. And I think the thing that is becoming clear to me And we had a conversation before, and we talked about like, are boundaries set by our judging functions, or decision-making functions, or by our perceiving functions?
Yeah.
And of course, it's hard to know which function we're in at any given time sometimes, because they're all kind of working together in concert. But I would say that the place to really attune ourselves in our boundary setting is our decision making, our judging functions, because they're the things that let us know what we value, and they're what helps set limits on ourselves. And so if we're going to set limits, then boundaries are limitations, then our judging functions are probably really helpful here. And the thing I've realized for myself is that the reason why boundary setting is sometimes difficult is that I think it needs a fair amount of both the feeling function and the thinking function. I think you need both of them. Now, all of us have both the thinking and a feeling function inside of our CAR model. So in our personality type construction, our CAR model are our 4 preferred cognitive functions, or Jungian cognitive functions, in a descending order of certainty. And all of us in our CAR model have at least one feeling function and one thinking function. Now, where it sits in the CAR does matter a lot, right? It matters quite a bit, but whether or not it's a preferred function or not, we can still integrate the other side. So I would say that boundary setting for us as people who are type enthusiasts is a matter of attuning to where our feeling function is, where our thinking function is, and then what kind it is, right? What's the polarity in there?
Yes.
So not all, there's 2 different feeling functions, and there's 2 different thinking functions, and they're tied to and associated with themselves. And so if we can figure out, okay, which functions do I have? Where do they fit? What's the one that feels more certain? What's the one that feels more uncertain? And how is that impacting and affecting how I'm constructing my boundaries around me? I think that we can attune a lot with a lot more intention to go, no, this is where my boundaries need to be set at this time period.
So Antonia, I think that what we could do now is go through, you just mentioned the judging functions as, there's 4 of these that are distributed around personalities. We could talk about each one of them because they are associated together. So we could talk about them in isolation and connection, and just walk through, we'll talk about which personality types have these functions, and then what the character and qualities are, and then we can wrap up. How's that sound?
I think that's a great idea. Before we go into it, I'll say why I believe both sides, both the feeling and the thinking aspects, need to be in here with boundary setting. Sometimes the need is not to tighten the boundaries. Sometimes it's to expand them. Like if we have 2 tight boundaries, like you said, sometimes we become impenetrable, and we don't want our boundaries to look like, like a castle with like a moat around it and alligators in it. And
ivory tower.
That's right. Like, spikes with heads on them or whatever. Like, we don't want our boundaries to look like that, but we also don't want them to be, like a old broken rickety fence with like a swinging gate that's barely on its hinges, right? Like we can't have our boundaries look like, just anybody can come in, but we also don't want it to look like we're telegraphing to keep out, because then that turns us into people who are lonely. Like there's important things to protect inside of ourselves, but protection doesn't mean never taking risks. It doesn't mean that we put something in like a glass case and never engage with it. The thing that we're protecting is our life force, effectively. That's effectively what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect our physical safety. We're trying to protect our emotional safety, our cognitive safety, and we're trying to protect our future, right?
Our energy too.
Our direction, and our energy. But overly protecting something, we've noticed this with the culture of safetyism. What that taught us is actually safetyism makes us not resilient people. So in some ways, if we overprotect something, it loops around, it does 180. And now we're not protecting it at all because it has no resilience to it.
It's fragile.
It's fragile. That's right. And anything can break it. And so in some ways, a little bit of grit, a little bit of like, putting ourselves in situations that are not totally safe, right? Not 100% protecting ourselves against absolutely anything that can happen, actually puts us in a better protective space. So when we talk about boundaries, we're not saying here's how you keep yourself in a bubble and away from anything that could ever hurt you. It's, are you making sure that if something hurts you, it's not like devastating you to a point where you can't move on, right? Yeah. It's you have an eye on making sure you're going to be okay. And usually I've noticed that the things that boundaries are best for is stopping slow over or lifetime leaks.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me, I don't know that my emotional energy is just about out while the process is happening. Does that make sense? Like it's almost there.
You experience it as an event.
But yeah, it's right. I experienced it as an event, but it was actually like a slow leak for a super long amount of time. And what good boundaries do is that they're early distant warnings. They go, okay, so you have enough ability to do this for a time, but at this point you should probably check in and make sure you have the emotional energy for it. Because if you keep giving beyond that, like you said, now it's going to become an event. Now it's like I can't, and then I might even harm myself or other people by saying terrible things and being blamey and being victimy because I let that happen.
Yeah.
So boundaries are not things that are intended to keep us safe forever, right? And never experience anything harsh in the world, because that's really not possible. Boundaries are there to give us clues as to when something's encroaching. And so we need to make sure that as we craft our boundaries for ourselves, that we are not overly protective, because that actually ends up becoming something that makes us vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important that we all acknowledge we have both and we integrate both, right? Because we don't want thinkers to dehumanize, but we also don't want feelers being incapable of solving their own problems, right? And so I'm not saying I'm not saying that feelers can't solve problems. Obviously they do all the time, because they also have a thinking function.
Yeah.
And it's not, thinkers are not heartless, evil people who are just looking to, solve problems at the cost of people. They have a feeling function that helps mitigate that. But that's why you need both of them together. You need the part that humanizes self and others, and you need the part that solves problems regardless of how it makes people feel.
All right. So having said all that, let's talk about let's just pick the first function. We actually mentioned it already. Extroverted feeling. Harmony is the nickname we give it. This is used by all the FJs in the Myers-Briggs system, and all the TPs are going to have this too, but it's going to be more of a less preferred, uncertain part of themselves. So they have it, but it's not as prominent. But the FJs, man, this is how they make their best decisions. Yeah.
And so extroverted feeling, or what we call harmony, is a function that is attuned to relationships specifically. And so that's why we mentioned before, FJs are that's usually where the conversation that they have around boundary setting goes.
Yep.
And because it's a certain function, by certain we mean like there's a sense of confidence in it, then FJs believe that they know how relationships and relational dynamics should be set up. And they also are very attuned to people getting their needs met. And so when a need goes unmet and nobody's meeting it, then there's a part of themselves that goes, well, I should be meeting it then. Like it needs to be met, so I should do it. And so there's a lot of outpouring energy that happens with this function. The challenge is that if it isn't balanced with its thinking side, it doesn't know necessarily when to stop. And so EFJs almost have a compulsion for this. IFJs can, if they want to, kind of back off of it a little bit.
Yeah.
They don't have, they have the same instinct, they have the same desire, but they don't have as much of a compulsion as people with EFJ preferences, because it's in a different position. EFJs have it as a driver in their car model. IFJs have it as a co-pilot. And so because of that, this need to get other people's needs met and make sure people are emotionally okay and make sure that relationships are set up that the way they should be, however the person using the function believes that, then it ends up becoming a challenge with boundary setting, because they don't know when they're off the clock. They don't know the moment when it's no longer their job to be doing it, or they don't know when it's no longer their responsibility, because they kind of feel like it's always their responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is why the thinking function of introverted thinking or accuracy is so important for FJs to attune to, because the only time that most FJs feel like they don't have to constantly be monitoring this channel is when they're totally alone. Right. And when they're like, everybody else is gone. There are no needs visible in front of them.
The house is empty.
The house is empty. Everybody is gone. Like, I don't feel any energetic tether to any
What about
person.
the cat, though? Wouldn't that be stimulating some need?
Yeah, it would be nice if the cat left too, but the pets can, I guess, stick around.
Sure.
But there's
people are gone.
But the people are all gone. Right.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And that's actually the same feeling that introverted thinking or accuracy has even when people are around. ITPs can do this. So introverted thinking or accuracy is the function that's preferred by TP types. ITPs have it as a driver function, and ETPs have it as a co-pilot function.
Yeah.
And this is a function that allows them to basically kind of not acknowledge that other human beings are around at all, even if they're surrounded by them.
I always thought you were just in deep focus. Yeah. I didn't know you weren't trying to acknowledge my existence, but...
Well, they're one and the same, actually. they're the same thing. Like, because if I'm attuning to you, I'm no longer in deep focus, right? Now I'm like, okay, what do you need, right? Yeah. Now I'm attuning to your getting needs met. Now I'm in my extroverted feeling or harmony. I'm like, okay, so what's going on? So this function of introverted thinking or accuracy, it disassociates from self, but it also disassociates from other people. And that's its purpose. Its purpose is to give the capacity for focus and for deep thinking and for clean thinking and getting really in there to figure out what makes sense to you. Now, when
and that's because it cuts out other people and itself, it doesn't create bias then. That's why you need that for clean thinking.
Correct.
Because that brings bias. If you have to consider your partner or your friends, it's like, well, my thinking is going to take them into account then.
Right.
So getting them out of the equation, now I can actually think about the thought and the principles without people.
It's attempting to not be influenced by anybody else's emotional response to something.
Yes.
Right, including your own. And so it's really super helpful for an FJ type to start to integrate this part of themselves, because it means that they don't have to get rid of everybody in order to feel a sense of sort of detethering from needs, right?
Yeah.
Like they can still be around other people and go, it's not my job to get that person's need met. And here's the thing that's really, I mean, just sort of stunning when you see an FJ type integrate this part of who they are, particularly EFJ types.
Yeah.
Is they start to realize that in some ways it's good for people to have to get their own needs met. Like they might have been overreactionary. They might have been jumping in to help other people out, and they would never want to do this, but ends up harming others in the process, but definitely harming themselves through this overgiving and having poor boundaries of what they will pour out. And so a little introverted thinking goes a long way. Yeah. Introverted thinking goes, well, what if I didn't do that? Right, I'm going to question my premise. Is this my job? Because that's the function's job, is to question premises. It's like, is this my job? If it's not my job, whose job is it? Right? Yeah. Is it the person's job to get their need met? Well, what happens if I get their need met and it was actually their job to do it for themselves? Now what's happened, right? And it works through the logic of it to oftentimes eventually get to the conclusion of like, actually letting other people get their needs met is the right thing for everybody. That's actually how you get needs met, is by allowing them to do it on their own. Yeah. And now if I show up and get a need met, it's because I've already done the calculus, and this is a moment in which, this is a good moment for me to do it because it fulfills me. And it's not creating codependency. It's not harming the other person's capacity to do it for themselves, right? It's it's sort of the human version of like, don't feed the wild animals because they get dependent upon it. Yeah. It's like, how am I quote unquote feeding the wild animals? How am I training them out of doing it for themselves? And so just a little bit of introverted thinking oftentimes helps FJ types come to really good boundaries, and they don't feel this need to jump in all the time. They kind of they met it out a little bit more. Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is the fact that you have on one side this very expressed feeling process that's all about human connection. It's the space between humans. It's the relational negotiation of, our dynamic. And it can be just one or two people, but it could be entire societies or cultures. And it's a beautiful process that understands that need meeting, that connection, that rapport, energetically getting along. I think trust is a big element of the boundaries that extroverted feeling or harmony sets. I think it's really designed to help with trust, right? I think I don't have a fence around my yard, and my neighbors don't either. And we don't mess with each other's stuff. We live in a nice neighborhood that doesn't have to put fences up. And in a way, it's that extroverted feeling is, look, I'm not going to come and do stuff on your property if you don't come do it on mine. And we don't. We kind of just trust each other not to.
But if our neighbors started like wandering around in our yard all the time and coming and like sort of taking our, tools out of our shed or whatever, we might have to put up a fence or a boundary to go.
Or talk to them at least. Have a hard conversation with them. Like, hey, that's not cool to take my stuff every day.
Right, exactly. And so like, or if it was a culture thing, if it was like the culture of the neighborhood, we might have to put up a fence to go, we're not going to be part of that.
Yes.
Right. We're not going to be part of that cultural.
We have
norm.
some neighbors that have fences up that don't want to be part of the more open,
That's right.
friendly culture. Because
Right.
it's more of a friendly, open neighborhood, and people just kind of kids run through everybody's yard and stuff. But some neighbors have fences so kids don't come in
Don't
their
do that.
yards.
Right.
And they have a different boundary, right?
Correct.
In their yard.
And
so
they're communicating it.
So I think that's, so you need one side to kind of have that trust built where it's like we kind of pre-assume it. And then there's also, but when that boundary's crossed, and I've seen this happen, and you don't have that truth-telling mechanism, it's hard sometimes to have that hard conversation or to do the thing to okay, now you've encroached. Now I've got to say something. I got to first identify to myself a principle's been crossed.
Right.
And now I've got to assert the boundary again and say that wasn't okay to do that.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, I think you just made clear something that I didn't communicate, which is that introverted thinking or accuracy is also there to help articulate positions. It's to help communicate the thoughts that we have around something, our reasoning, and make it so that other people realize it's not necessarily personal. Like if introverted thinking or accuracy is doing its job, the other person can hear the ring of truth without taking it personally because the biases are not woven in there. And so there's no personal bias. It's not personal to you.
Yeah.
And so if an FJ type starts to integrate this function, not only are they able to get a little bit of psychological and emotional distance or like energetic distance from other people to, as mentioned, run the calculus, they can also communicate it. They can articulate it well. They can say, this is why I'm not doing something. Now, another person might not like what they're expressing, and they might get upset, and the instinct for extroverted feeling or harmony will be like, oh, this person is upset. I'm not supposed to make them upset, or I must be doing something wrong if they're upset, or it's my job to make it so that they're soothed, that they're no longer upset.
Yeah.
But introverted thinking or accuracy goes, no, it's not. It's not your job. You articulated and expressed it the best way possible. Or to go back into that function to run the calculus again. Okay, I did that. It made the other person upset. What's my responsibility here?
Yeah.
And when you get into your rational, logical mind and you're not just influenced by other people's emotional responses, but you get into your rational mind, a lot of times the conclusion is it's not rational that they're doing that. They're actually probably manipulating me, or they just don't see, they don't have to be manipulating. They might just not see a big enough picture, or the lack is not on my side. The lack is on what they're contending with. And once again, is it my job to train them to become a person that doesn't do that anymore? Is it my job to make sure that they feel good all the time so that they're always happy with their experience? Or is it my job to model what it looks like to have healthy relationships and healthy boundaries? And if I model it, including articulating and expressing my position, not personally, but in a very like sort of cool way, right? Not cold, but like in a, non-high temperature way.
Yeah.
Then if they're a complete person, right? If they're an adult that has to navigate their way through reality, then I let them be mad, and it's their job to figure those emotional responses out. And so it's not just I thought about it and then I didn't get the result I wanted, and so now I go back to capitulation. It's I didn't get the result I was expecting. I'm going to go back into thinking. All right. Because that's still the thing I need to integrate. So other people's emotional responses are not the final word. Right. Yeah. It's not it's one piece of information.
Yeah.
To introverted thinking or accuracy, you go, okay, that's what happened, and now I'm going to continue to reason my way through it. Now, you can never exchange one function for the other. An FJ type, particularly an EFJ, will never have introverted thinking as their dominant or driver function. So it's not like this is not the thing they now rely on.
They're not going to become mean and like hard-edged and all. They could maybe say something to me, but they're not going to become a mean person probably.
Well, sometimes they do, and it's usually not because they've woven in a good amount of thinking. It's because they are in reaction.
Yeah.
They're becoming harsh because they're trying to push other people away, so they don't actually have to do the hard work of thinking it through, understanding what their position is, and articulating and expressing it. It's much easier to just be harsh and push people away.
Gotcha.
And so that's an overreaction. But sometimes you have to figure that out. Sometimes it's a matter of, like I said, like our boundaries change over time, and it's a moving target, and we just kind of have to figure it out on our own.
So what I think we're saying here, and by the way, I'd love to hear if you're an FJ type, you have harmony as your decision maker, IFJ, EFJ, and you're using this as the skill you bring to the world. What do you struggle with in boundary setting? Do you identify with some of the things Antonia talked about? Is it like that truth that you have. What we're saying is you have this mechanism, right? But leave a comment what your story is. I'll just say this. You have this mechanism, this like little truth part of yourself that can go back and check with your own beliefs and assumptions. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about trust and relational boundaries being negotiated, well, this is really important for the negotiation. You have to know how you feel about your side of it and know what you believe and your thoughts to enter that negotiation, right? And if you don't have that mechanism, which you do as an FJ, you have this available to you. You just have to exercise it, balance it, and grow it. Mm-hmm. And then you can bring that to all those negotiations. I think with practice, you can get much better at it. So what I hear you saying, Antonia, some FJs have such an avoidance of that negotiation moment to moment. And some IFJs really struggle with this, that they say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go through and learn that skill or do that, or I've been burned, or whatever their story is of why they don't want to do it. So they just create a really rigid boundary way out here. And then I can just rest behind that wall. I don't have to maybe necessarily do all the things that, are required of me to think through the process or something like that. But they're not exercising that mechanism. They're not balancing. And now if they are confronted with a boundary cross, they may not have the skill to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate.
Well, and what ends up happening is that they lack meaning and purpose because they end up sort of running over, sort of getting rid of everybody in their life other than people who they feel, what's that?
Make it in.
Yeah. Like, or their circle is so tiny that they don't really have the impact that they would like to have, because it's not like extroverted feeling or harmony is a bad function. No. And if it's your driver or your co-pilot function, even your co-pilot function, it's part of how you get into flow. Mm-hmm. It's part of what you believe you bring to the world. It's part of your gifts. And so if you do too much cordoning off, then you're missing a really big part of your soul. And then the boundary is not healthy there either.
Yeah. Let's flip to the other function here. Let's go to so we just talked about the extroverted feeling comes with this introverted thinking. Mm-hmm. And let's just flip it. Let's talk about the TPs. Mm-hmm. So ETPs, ITPs are going to use this as a decision-making process. It's their best decision-making that they have available to them. They're going to have harmony, but it's going to be in the backseat of their car, their personality car. And it's going to be uncertain for them, like mildly uncertain or deeply uncertain. So I think about introverted thinking boundaries and I'm like, well, what does this even look like? Because I always perceive people that have introverted thinking to not struggle with this at all. Like they know what they think. Often they're asserting opinions to me. I've talked to an INTP maybe, and they're like, this is how you should think. This is the right way to think. Yeah. I have no doubts about my thinking.
Yeah.
My friends are that way. You have some of this too. Like you're very clear. You seem very confident. What does it mean to even set boundaries around introverted thinking or accuracy? Like how would that even be? Yeah. I guess I would imagine somebody trying to manipulate how you would think about something, but that doesn't really happen to TPs often, does it?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily setting boundaries around introverted thinking. It's more like, how do I set healthy boundaries as a person, and how is my decision-making function going to influence me doing that? And so, like I said before, I don't know how other TP types feel, but I just don't allow people to speak to me with disrespect. I just don't. And so I think my introverted thinking allows me to say that very clearly, right? Yeah. I'm very good at expressing and articulating when a boundary is there. The challenge is that extroverted feeling or harmony, which is the relational part of ourselves, sits in an uncertain position. And because of that, we're not 100% sure whether or not we're giving what we should be giving. We don't know if we have more obligation or if what we're giving is sufficient. Most TP types would like to have friendships. They would like to have relationships with other people. They would like to, to be in a back and forth and to be supportive of others. It's for ITPs, it's extroverted feeling or harmony is part of what they idealize, right? It's a place of idealization. And so supporting other people and being there for others is actually that's something that's rewarding, like spiritually rewarding. Yeah. The challenge is that we tend to, as TP types, we tend to be really uncalibrated around it. We either massively undergive or we massively overgive. And I don't think people realize just how often TPs are set themselves up for codependent relationships. Yeah. Where they are over, and of course we're going to give the thing that we believe we have to give, which is problem solving and helping people out with their challenges and struggles. And, offering good advice or clean thinking, or, showing up in behalf of other people in, like to give them good counsel or to help them figure out something in their life. And so the challenge is, when have I given enough? And did I earn my way into this relationship? So the poor boundary that TPs oftentimes have is that they feel like they have to kind of sort of earn their place. They have to give enough so that other people think that they're valuable. Because the challenge is that we don't know how valuable we are. We don't have a measuring stick for that. We might think that our thinking is valuable, and we might believe that we really come with a lot of skills, but deep down inside, we're not sure what our value as people is. If we're not helping, if we're not problem solving, if we're not doing something for somebody else, do I have intrinsic worth or value all by myself? And that big question blurs boundary lines like crazy.
Yeah.
We can cloister ourselves off. We can go into hiding. We can get into codependent relationships and massively overgive and allow other people to take advantage of us. Like, our challenge with boundary setting is not, it's very much relational. And we'll have like high degrees of, certainty and value in our ability to be good employees, to get jobs done. We usually feel very confident in our ability to like show up in most other aspects of life. But in interpersonal relationships, sometimes we really struggle. And so our job, as opposed to FJs, which, tend to think that it's their responsibility to always help everybody out here, and then they've got to get a little bit more, maybe I need to run the calculus and realize that I don't have to do that. For TP types, we have to have enough extroverted feeling or harmony to be able to receive feedback from other people emotionally. Yeah. Like, if a person is showing up with love and attunement for you, if they're showing up maybe saying nice things or like really showing gratitude, introverted thinking or accuracy has a tendency to not receive the emotional content. We just don't hear their love. We don't hear their positivity. We don't hear their emotional expression back, because we train ourselves all the time to cut that off and to just look at the dialogue and the words. And so sometimes the boundary that ends up being, like the difficulty in creating a boundary is we don't let ourselves be loved in some weird way. Like, we don't protect a precious part of ourselves because we don't know it's precious. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we're not self-protective enough. And I would say, actually, that's the challenge of the polarity. So if it sounds like FJs and TPs have very similar work, the answer is that we do. We have very similar work to do, because it's the polarity itself that's creating the challenge with boundaries.
Yes.
So extroverted feeling harmony and introverted thinking accuracy, these come as a match set. They're a polarity. One does not exist without the other. In other podcast episodes, we've called them two sides of the same coin. And it's that coin, so to speak, or it's that polarity that struggles with the same boundary setting challenges, which is, am I valuable all by myself? Do I have to be giving? Is it my job to show up for other people and give? Is it my job to, to constantly be helping people solve their problems? Who am I if I'm not, in relationship? Am I allowed to say my truth? Am I allowed to separate from other people? And if I do that, does that make me a bad, not does it make me a bad person, but does it mean I'm no longer in relationship? These are all the questions that the polarity itself has and struggles with boundary setting.
I could also see maybe TP struggling with not knowing, like, when somebody is real, like, it's almost like reciprocity questions. Like, when somebody's really kind to you and maybe gives you a gift, you don't know the appropriate, like, am I always supposed to give something back? Am I supposed to just receive it? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, for TPs in like relational things in that way too, is like, it's not just the boundaries, but it's like, am I allowed to not have a rigid boundary here? Am I allowed to give or receive on this? Like, it's a lot of question marks around that, I think, and not understanding the expectations, I guess what I'm trying to say. They don't understand what expectations being asked of me. And so I don't want to make a mistake here. And so sometimes the boundary setting could be too like, well, I just don't do that. And it's way back here, or it's like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to do this. And you push it way up, but you're letting someone else kind of dictate the expectation and the fulfillment of the expectation.
Yes.
I'm not a TP, so it's hard for me to really tune into what you might experience as a TP.
And the younger a TP is in particular, I would say an FJ too, but TPs in particular, the younger a TP is, the less they're attuned to how they really feel about things.
Yeah.
And the easier it is for them to convince themselves that they don't need anybody. And when a TP type convinces themselves that they don't need anybody, they aren't registering how lonely they are. They're not registering how many hits they're taking. And then they're really vulnerable to enter a codependent relationship. That's when they're the most. And in fact, they'll enter a relationship almost immediately setting it up in a codependent way without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And so they might even have an attitude. I mean, there might be a young TP listening right now. I mean, I don't mean to call you out if I'm talking to you, but if you happen to be the person I'm talking about, but there's like, I don't do that. I don't think I don't have value in a relationship. I don't think I need people, or like whatever, like I don't, whatever. And that might be true. I could be totally wrong, but I think as a TP ages, the more they realize that was actually a self-protective attitude.
Yeah.
We really do need people. We really do need the rapport and the relationship and the back and forth. And we just have either too harsh of boundaries, like nobody can tell me anything, or we have too open boundaries and we just will give everybody the world and then get really hurt when people don't give back in the same way.
I think the final thing I'd say for introverted thinking users, TPs, is that they don't understand. When we talk about extroverted thinking, I'll get to this, but like information can be weaponized and it can be used against you, and secrets and things, vulnerabilities you tell people, they can exploit that. They can not honor it or be respectful of it. So you talk about this idea of respect. I think one of the things introverted thinking users have to realize is that your honesty and your forthcomingness and your ability to just call it how it is and all the truth, and being like, I'm an open book, and maybe you feel like you can share things openly because it's just truths. Sometimes you should have some boundaries around that, because you can't trust what people are going to do with it. Not because you're bad or wrong for doing it. Like, say whatever you feel comfortable doing, but you don't realize other people are going to exploit you or weaponize it against you or manipulate what you said. Like, that's not what I said. And they twist it, or they put meaning onto it, or project something that you didn't actually intend. So I think that's probably a real practical boundary that some TPs may look at. If you're a TP listening right now, if you're an ITP or ETP, maybe look at just how forthcoming you are. And maybe you hold back too much because you've been burned. Where's the appropriate amount of information to share? That's probably a boundary that a lot of TPs have to adjust for.
Yeah. And one of the big challenges is that as FJs and TPs, if we don't get our boundaries set very well, we end up encroaching on other people. And this is where we get a bad reputation, where extroverted feeling or harmony in particular gets a bad reputation. But we can get into other people's business. And I've noticed that, sometimes TP types can create the most amount of drama without even realizing it. They'll leave little drama bombs all over the place, and they don't know that they're doing it.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Like they don't know that they're exchange of like telling people things that somebody told them socially, and now they're sharing the information.
Oh yeah, that too. Other people's information. Yeah. You don't have boundaries around sometimes. Right. I didn't even think about that one.
Yeah. But even our own, like sometimes we're creating relational drama and not even realizing we're doing it to stay in rapport with someone.
Yeah.
And FJs can do this too by being very manipulative. Like if we don't have good boundaries as people, as FJs and TPs, we can become manipulative. We can become drama queens. We can there's a lot of stuff that comes in here so that we're not just creating good boundaries for ourselves. We're creating good boundaries for our little ecosystems too.
Absolutely. Okay. If you're a TP user and this is something you've noticed, like, are you too free with information? Have you entered codependent relationships before? Are you too rigid with information because you've been burned? What's your story or situations that you've been through underneath this episode? Just like we asked the FJs just a few minutes ago, what's coming up for you? How have you experienced this in your life? What experiences have you been through? Have you adjusted those? Have you matured it? Is it something you still struggle with? Again, under this episode, whatever platform you're on, make your voice heard. Let's talk about introverted feeling and extroverted thinking. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with introverted feeling just because I want to.
I think you should. So
this is used by all FPs in the Myers-Briggs system. TJs will have this in a backseat, less preferred, less certain function, right? Mm-hmm. I have a pet peeve. Mm-hmm. I have a boundary cross that I get angry about every time I think about it. I talk about it at our profiler training events. We talk about that introverted feeling. I find it abhorrent and disturbing and upsetting and angering that in my country, in the United States, there are people right now, and people can be sent to jail for intent, for not committing a crime, for not doing anything wrong, but for a judge, a jury, or other people projecting onto them that they might do something wrong.
Right.
They have the potentiality to do wrongdoing, and they lock them up, not for something they did, but for something they could do based on a projected level of intent. And as an introverted feeling user, I go, half the time, I don't even, like, it's hard to know your own intent.
Yeah.
How could I throw someone in jail based on an assumption of intent of just something I projected onto them? And an example would be in America, in many states, if you have a drug on you and you have enough volume of it, you will get in trouble for having possession of that drug if it's illegal, which I understand. I totally get that. You have an illegal possession of a substance, you probably should go to jail if it's illegal. I don't have a problem with that because that's the wrongdoing. But then they say, but you, because you had that amount, we're going to project onto you, you had an intent to do something bad with that. And we're going to increase the crime. We're going to increase the sentence. We're going to throw you in jail longer. Or we're going to put you in jail. We would let you off there, but we're going to put you in jail now because you had intent. It's like, how do you know the intent? How do you know the intent of this person? And there's many laws like this that they're like this. And it feels like a massive boundary cross for somebody. Because it's like, I think humans have a hard time even understanding their own intent. How the heck is some judge or jury going to know it? So anyway, thank you for letting me. I'll gently climb off my soapbox now.
All right. So
that's an example, I think, of me feeling like there's a boundary cross in somebody's sovereignty or their ability to do so. I think it's a boundary cross that's systemic, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think actually introverted feeling or authenticity is like a really lovely function for creating boundaries when it comes to understanding the preciousness of the self. Like there's something important to protect. I think that's one of the attunements that this function has. I'm not sure how to weave it into your soapbox around whether or not having an intent to sell a certain drug because you've been caught with
by the way, it's never happened to me. I've never been caught with a drug. I've never gotten in trouble for it. I've never sold or had intent to sell. This is completely, I've observed this, honestly. Like I've never had this happen to me. But when I've seen it, it upsets me because it's like, how could you know what that person's intent is? It's almost like I'm champion for them.
Yeah. So again, I'm not sure how to necessarily weave my conversation around. You're going to have to create the segue.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So, I think it's when we're talking about boundaries, that's one example of, I think, a boundary. That's a pretty big one in a society level. But I think there's smaller ones. There's smaller little boundary crosses for introverted feeling. So introverted feeling is all about what is authentically in alignment for me. Mm-hmm. What are the motivations and intent that somebody has for something? And you often are tracking it in yourself and you're trying to figure out why am I motivated for what I'm motivated? Why do I desire what I desire? What motivates people? What motivates me? How do I get things motivated? How do I get into interalignment? How do I feel about this as I go through the experience? Oh, that didn't make me feel good. I don't like that. Oh, that made me feel really good and made me feel in alignment. That feels good. Like all these different metrics that we're working with introverted feeling.
So perhaps the reason why that feels like a boundary cross is because nobody gets to tell you what your intentions are.
That's right.
Nobody gets to tell you what's inside of you and what is motivating and driving and what you intend to do.
I mean, they can, but they'll be wrong.
Right.
I mean, 100% of the time they'll be wrong because we're usually not even right about ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's a complexity that we get some of it right, but there's not one intent. Mm-hmm. It's not like an intent to do evil. It's a ton of intents.
Right.
And it's a hierarchy of them. It's basically which one wins out over all the others and which one orders them in a certain way. And so, yes, no one gets to tell you what your intention was. And I think that is if somebody tries to project, and I'll tell you when we talk about TJs, and if I ask a TJ user, extroverted thinking effectiveness user, they have this in their backseat. They hate having intent. Everybody hates having intent projected onto them, but they really hate it because it's just an uncertain part.
Yeah.
And so it makes them feel deeply uncertain.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. Well,
I don't care if somebody projects ill intent onto me. It doesn't bother me at all.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's usual with TP. I think almost everybody has said, oh, I hate it when people project bad intent onto me. But for some reason, that mechanism inside of me is dead. Probably because introverted feelings in my seven function, so I just don't care.
Well, you wouldn't like inappropriate emotions project onto you. So like if I said, oh, you're mad and you weren't mad, you would hate that. You'd be like, I'm not mad. Why are you telling me? No, I'm feeling mad.
Yeah. Like, don't tell me what I'm feeling. I don't like to be told what I'm feeling, but I don't care if somebody tells me what my intent is.
So those are kind of two parts of it. So one could be about the way you're feeling. That could be the intent. But the point is that
you're right. That is how introverted feeling works. But tell me where the boundary struggle is as the representative of introverted feeling right now.
Well, as far as you mean the intent of it, like
No, I mean, like, honestly, like, we spent a bunch of time with extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, talking about where they struggle with boundaries. So what's the struggle with boundaries? Like, if the struggle is not in allowing people to project ill intent onto you, like, that's not where introverted feeling struggles with boundaries at all. That usually is very, the function is ready to defend itself, right? It's ready to make sure that people do not encroach on intentions and character.
Yeah.
But where does it struggle with boundaries?
Well, I think I'll go back to the judiciary system, because I think how many lawyers are like bleeding heart, introverted feeling types. I think the breakdown of the boundary is, if I can see the humanity in the action, even a terrible action. I mean, it was like a really bad action. I'm like, I could kind of see, if I was in that situation, under that kind of pressure, growing up in that circumstance, with that consideration, I could see myself doing something similar. And so I think it's hard to like, I think sometimes introverted feeling has a hard time taking a stand for something, or feeling like there's like a sense of like objective good or bad, or right or wrong. It's like there's a lot of gray area, especially when you look at human situations, because this is a very humanizing process. It's like, well, if I was in that situation, here's how I'd feel. I can kind of see why that person did that. So I'm going to kind of support them and feel like they're a human, and they were under some struggle, and they were under some duress. And of course they're going to have maybe some inappropriate motivations or some inappropriate actions based on those feelings, and that, they're cornered or whatever.
And I've seen that manifest in that exception thinking.
Yeah, it's exception thinking. Exactly.
Right.
Thank you. That's like you give the exception to yourself and others, because you're like, well, the humanity of it, man.
Right. And so giving yourself, having exception thinking for the self oftentimes means the boundaries are not very good for self-discipline.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't necessarily always mitigate your compulsions, or it's easy to say this is just the kind of person I am, or to give yourself a pass for certain behaviors.
Yeah, because you know all the exceptions inside yourself.
Because you understand why you're doing it and all your motivations.
Like, well, I'm
and
tired
intentions.
today. I'm not going to do the thing I said I was going to do because I'm tired, and I know myself, and I give myself grace just like I'd give somebody else, et cetera, et cetera.
But I've also noticed that this exception thinking also extends to other people, to the point where the FP user will allow themselves to be taken advantage of if they can understand the exception.
Yeah.
Like I remember somebody with INFJ preferences talking about an INFP colleague of theirs. They were, I think they were therapists. I'm fairly certain. And the INFJ was saying this INFP is always making exceptions for her clients by letting them come in late or
pay less
or whatever. And she's making it so hard for me as her, working in the same, I think they were in like the same clinic or therapy, building or whatever, to a point where this person's clients impacted this person, whatever the situation or setup was. But they were like, it's making it really hard for me to assert my boundaries, where it's like, no, you have to show up on time. And if you miss your appointment, we charge you for the missed appointment if you didn't call us and let us know. Like there were certain guidelines and rules. But the IFP had so much exception thinking that they were letting people off the hook. Yeah. And probably, when you're a therapist, the person's circumstances and situations, and you understand what's going on for them in their life. So I could see that being a situation where a lot of exception thinking was coming in. Especially
if it's around resource or time, because that's something the IFP probably struggles with themselves.
Well, and I was going to say, that's the challenge. That's usually where the boundaries are crossed, is in taking resource, taking time, taking energy.
Especially if it's very personal to you.
Yeah.
You let yourself off the hook, so you're going to do it for somebody else.
Correct. And so there's a little bit of boundary. There are usually stronger boundaries that need to be made with the self. And there's usually stronger boundaries that need to be made with other people, specifically when it comes to time, energy, money.
And I've seen this with introverted feeling too, is there's no exceptions. I've done this where I'm like, no, absolutely. Even if it makes sense to have some compassion or humanity, it's like this rigid, I don't care if I'm dying, I'll crawl across broken glass to get it done. This kind of like, it just doesn't matter. It'll happen, God's will or anything, I will it to be. It's this kind of like overarching, just never give up, to the point of ridiculousness sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the challenges. I mean, I don't know if you I don't know how you feel about me bringing this up, so let
boy.
me know.
Let you know after you bring it up.
Yeah, after I bring it up. But one of the challenges you had in your first marriage was that you believed it was the godly thing to do to stay in that relationship, even if it was extremely abusive.
No exceptions.
And so you allowed so many boundaries to be crossed on so many different channels, because you were going to have this one channel of your relationship to God be pure, and you believed all of this abuse was a part of communicating your will, or your good relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so you
absolutely.
So that because you had a conviction around that, the person in your life took advantage of the conviction.
That's
they
right.
took advantage of the fact that you were convicted for something important, and they crossed your boundaries like crazy on all the other channels.
Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual.
Yeah. And so I think introverted feeling can become so singular focused on a conviction that that it's like they don't even think of boundaries as being categorical.
Yes.
Right? Like there's categories of boundaries. And so in order to stay attuned to this, there were no boundaries anywhere else. You were able to be treated however they wanted to treat you.
And I would just finally say, maybe for introverted feeling, there's a little bit of a nepotistic, like conceptually nepotistic, although actually literally nepotistic too sometimes, but like conceptually, like if you're in the inner circle and we trust each other, you're in. And if you're not, you're out. And it's kind of like very bifurcated. Like you're either in the trust circle or you're not, and you're like an NPC.
The circle of trust.
Non-player character. Like you don't exist. I mean, you exist as a human, will be kind, but like you're either in or out. It's kind of this, it's like this trust and loyalty circle.
Yeah.
Loyalty is very important. Trust is very important. And it's, and yeah, it's kind of like, are you in the family or not?
Yeah.
Whatever family is defined by introverted feeling.
Yeah, and that is a boundary, that circle of trust, but it's not very flexible as evidenced by the movie, Meet the Parents.
Yeah.
It's like in the circle of trust, right? It's like you're either in or out. And so there's not flexibility to the boundaries either. Yeah. And so the other side of the polarity is extroverted thinking or effectiveness.
Well, let me just ask FPs, if you're resonating with some of these, have you struggled with some of those boundaries I just talked about? Do you hate it when people are punished for intent like I do? I got somebody to support me on that one. Maybe other types too. Come to my defense on this one. But what is your experience? What's the situation maybe you found yourself in around that? Has it been maybe more around that circle of trust? Is it more about resource? Do you have a tendency to make exceptions, or are you more the type that just doesn't make any exceptions? I'd like to get a sense of that in a discussion underneath this episode. All right, now let's talk about the other side, the TJ users.
No. I was going to talk about extroverted thinking, integrating that into introverted feeling.
Okay. I thought before you jump to the next group, I was like, let me ask people real quick.
No, it's like, what's the solution then?
Oh, okay. Yes. Let's go here.
So introverted feelings, other side is extroverted thinking or effectiveness.
That's right. The thinking part.
That's right. And so that's bringing that in requires the introverted feeling user to also think in terms of resource management outside of the individual component. Like, extroverted thinking has an ability to do what is called acceptable spillage, which it knows that no matter what you're doing, there's like you're going to be a little sloppy in resource here and there, but it's not famous for exception thinking, right? It's like it's a system is set up. There's only so much resource available.
Well, anyone who has a day job knows this, right? You got to fit yourself to the job.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to.
Exactly. And so this exception thinking doesn't really fly with extroverted thinking or effectiveness, which is why it's such an important counterbalance. It's like, okay, well, if we keep making exceptions, now we're just gonna we're basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna be killed on, say, quote unquote transaction fees. Yeah. Like every time somebody doesn't show up to my appointment on time, that gives them permission to not show up to my appointment on time in the future. Every time somebody doesn't call in and I don't charge them, now I'm losing money in this experience, right? And I get to do that once or twice, but if that's a habit of mine, people keep kind of crossing my boundary here on my resource. Yeah. Eventually I have nothing to give anymore.
Or I'm a leader and I know my team's having a hard time, so we keep these meetings long to help kind of emotionally manage people, but now we're not getting our work done and we're eroding maybe our metrics or something we got to do because I'm trying to manage the people here, but it's like maybe we just cut it off a certain time and get to work again.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and then so that's the external. And to your point, it's like extroverted thinking also understands that, there's a reason why Gantt charts exist. And that's because there's multiple things happening on the same timeline. Mm-hmm. It gives an FP type an ability to understand that there is not just one thing that's important. There are multiple things that are important that are running simultaneously. And so in your situation, it was like, yeah, my relationship to God is really important, but also my relationship to myself and my physical health and my emotional health and my psychological health, these are all running at the same time too. So good extroverted thinking or effectiveness would be, I need to be managing my energy, like my resource on those channels as well.
I was managing one resource channel. That was it.
Exactly. And
my spiritual channel.
Your
that was
spiritual
the only
channel.
one I was focused on.
Exactly. And all the rest of them were being totally ignored to a point where like you kind of hobbled out of that whole experience, right? like trying to figure out, patch yourself back together after something that was pretty traumatizing. And so
I was bankrupt on every other channel.
That's the perfect word.
I had debt. I was broken relationally. I mean, every other channel I had except my spiritual, and even that was eroded because I'm like, wait, if God really cared about it, wouldn't have come through and prevented all this from happening.
Correct.
So it kind of bankrupted me on all channels.
Right.
Ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And so some extroverted thinking or effectiveness encourages an FP to understand that like bankruptcy is a thing. And if you don't have good boundaries, you will give on these channels until you have nothing to give on any channel.
Yeah.
And then as far as the inner discipline, right? The exception thinking for the self, extroverted thinking or effectiveness is also very powerful there because it reminds the FP what their ultimate end game is, what their desired end game is. Like, what am I trying to accomplish, right? What am I working towards? And if I keep giving myself exceptions, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to make any progress in my life. I'm not going to figure out how to do anything. I'm going to keep giving myself a pass. And that helps an FP type kind of go, yeah, but I actually kind of want to accomplish something in my life, right? And in the same way that a TP type needs relationships, even if they tell themselves they don't, right? And it's usually the younger ones that are in this situation. But a TP type that goes, no, I actually do need a lot. I do need, not a lot, but I need relational experiences. I need rapport with people. That is part of who I am. That's part of how I'm constructed. And so I need to be working towards that. An FP type can convince themselves that they hate the system and they don't care about moving up in a company or making money or whatever, but they can't deny that they want to have an impact on the world, right? They want to see a result for the time that they spent on this planet. And if they pretend that they don't care at all, then they're going to find themselves sort of existentially bankrupt, right? They're going to have no real meaning. They're not going to have a reason why they do anything. And so extroverted thinking or effectiveness helps them with resource management in general, but also to remember what they're fundamentally trying to accomplish in their life. And if they don't have something, then they need to set a goal. They need to try to accomplish something so that the impulse to give themselves a pass or give other people a pass, like that impulse is actually really poor boundaries. Yeah. And so extroverted thinking helps reattune to, well, the reality of the situation is that we have to be better resource managers.
Yeah. So let's flip over and talk about that extroverted thinking effectiveness. We've nicknamed it. Mm-hmm. This is used by TJs. So FPs like myself will have this more uncertain in our backseat, either as a 10-year-old tertiary or inferior 3-year-old. And we're uncertain and it's not super accessible, but TJs have this accessible. This is all about resource management, like you said. It's about metrics, about deliverables, about what works, and what needs to happen to be able to manage all this resource that you want to manage as a TJ is you need to kind of be in charge of it. So hierarchy enters here too. We've got structure, and certain humans are more responsible than other humans on like a hierarchy chain, like the highest up is the most responsible and then further down. And this makes sense, I think, in a big structure. If you're trying to accomplish something large, you have to delegate responsibilities and work in coordination, and you have to have a chain of command of some sort because people can't just completely operate autonomously. So all that makes sense. Where do boundary crosses enter here for extroverted thinking? Like you'd think that, well, they probably don't have a lot of, it's all just mechanistic, right? We have the rule sets and we have the agreements of what we're trying to accomplish. And so that's pretty straightforward, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we can have a lot of struggle here on this channel too.
Yeah. So it tends to not be as relational as, say, extroverted feeling or harmony's challenge with boundaries. It's more like responsibility creep.
Yeah.
It's like when a TJ sees something that needs to be done, if they see a problem to solve, then they tend to take it on as their responsibility to solve it a lot of times. And so it's not just working for its own sake. It's more like taking on too much responsibility that isn't theirs to take on.
Yeah.
As in like, when I say it has no personal meaning, I mean, it's like, it's almost like they think it's their job to do it, to take on systems that are not their systems, or to manage things in their world, even if it's not, it has kind of almost nothing to do with them. Does that make sense? It's like, it's my job to kind of solve everything for everybody.
I struggle with this a little bit. This is my 10-year-old or tertiary, and the effectiveness, extroverted thinking. I'm not a TJ type, but I struggle with a little bit of feeling responsible for a lot, like everything that's logistic. I tend to take leadership and responsibility almost compulsively in that part of me. But I've noticed that TJs do have a little bit better relationship with it. But what I think I have noticed is, I would take my own self for this. This is a little hard for me because this is I have so much idealism here, and I look at TJs as like, these handle this. They're so good at this. Probably you with FJs. You're like, how do you do it? So I'm always like in awe of what they do, but I know they're struggling with it. I think what ends up happening, I'll just use myself as a case, is like I take on too much, and I truly am trying to be responsible for it. And the only way to maintain that I took on is to like lock down more control, like just really be. And so I bet what's happening at, like, especially if you're like a boss that's a TJ boss that you don't like, that's over controlling, they're probably letting this responsibility creep happen. And then they have to be really controlling to be able to manage everything they've got underneath them. Right. And it's really a difficulty. Yeah.
Like it's their job to answer for everything.
Yeah. So you wouldn't see it necessarily obviously, but they're feeling it inside.
Right.
Like,
exactly. And I see this with the responsibility that some TJs take on, and some FPs too, but anybody with extroverted thinking or effectiveness, which is, like, let's say that you're a business owner. If my company isn't successful, look at all the people who work for me, and they all rely on me for their paychecks. So there's not a sense of like, well, no, these people are adults. If they don't have a job here, they can go get a job someplace else. Right. And it's like, they're relying on a paycheck. But I mean, I've been let go of jobs before because they had to downsize. I've been in situations where, I mean, I've been fired. I've been like, and those people at that moment, they felt terrible. And like, like it was their personal responsibility to make sure that I was employed. Yeah. And it's like, it's not your responsibility. It's my responsibility. At the end of the day, it's like, if I can't get a job, then it's my job to like, go gut a rabbit or something to eat. Like, it's like, fundamentally, I am like, it's nobody else's job to keep me alive except for me. Yeah. Right. And then maybe you, because you and I have like gone, hey, we're going to keep each other alive. Right. So you and I made that decision. That was part of what we agreed to when we got married, was to kind of have each other's back. But beyond you and me, it's nobody else's job to make sure that I'm getting a paycheck. It's my job.
So being overly responsible for other people or their lives or livelihoods. Exactly.
And so it's a poor boundary. It's like deciding that somebody who is under your, under your sort of hierarchy is like, you have a stewardship over their life, not just over where they fit in this hierarchy. Does that make sense? It's like, a manager or a boss, and not that all TJs are managers or bosses, but they tend to find those positions because they do take a lot of responsibility, right? And they seek them, so they tend to be in those positions. But somebody in that position, the chain of command indicates that there are certain aspects that I answer to them for, and they are responsible to make sure that I have everything I need to get the job done that we as a department answers for, right? Like that's the domain. But as far as like whether or not I'm feeding my kids is not. Does that make sense? And so it's an over responsibility. It's an over, and poor boundaries around like, well, but you can't fire me because then where will I go? And it's like, I don't know, but that's your job. It's your job to figure that out. Now, I'm not saying that a TJ type shouldn't feel sympathetic. They should feel sympathetic. But in some ways, this is like, it's taking on, it's in some ways also feeding a feeling of power. It's not just sympathy. It's also like, look at everything I have under me. It's, it's like I'm responsible for so much.
Yes.
And so then the boundaries get blurred in the desire for the power that comes along with it too.
Just so you know, if you're a TJ listener, I don't think power is bad and wrong in its own sake. I think it can be
I don't
used,
either. Just to be clear, I think power is very important. Actually,
I think it'd be misused and abused and poorly managed. But I don't. Power in itself, I do not believe, is a bad energy. I think it's an important energy we have to have on this planet. I think something else that came up for me as you're talking is when. The word when is big and key. And I think also it's almost like this binary. So extroverted thinking, effectiveness, is all about getting results. And while the process toward the result is happening, often I've noticed that extroverted thinking users are in a different mode than after the result has happened. They have like almost these two phases they have, like on-off switch. It's very binary. During the process, I was working with this TJ before, and he was kind of a jerk to all the people working with him. We were working for him. I was actually volunteering, and he treated me kind of harsh and was treating everybody harsh and was like nitpicking stuff. And like, I was like, man, I was kind of friends with him, and it was like a difficult experience I was having. And then the project finishes up, and we go to like the after party that night to celebrate what we did for like this weekend. It was like this video project we were doing. And he's like, he's drinking and he's happy and he's like really friendly with everybody. And it's like, oh, there's the friend I had. Like, he was kind of an a-hole while we were doing the thing, but now he's like super personable.
Right.
And so the boundary was like, okay, while we're working, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to be nice to you at all. I'm going to be focused. And I almost felt like unhuman to him.
Right.
And then afterward, I was like the coolest human ever. And he was like very personable and very friendly. So I think the matter of when on the timeline is going to be important for extroverted thinking. Maybe there's some work to be done to where you have more permeable, like you can oscillate that. You don't have to wait till the entire project or thing is complete, or 5 o'clock hits and now it's after work and now I can be a different, like your boundaries don't necessarily have to follow the 9 to 5 schedule.
Right.
Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Like I'm in my professional mode and these are all my boundaries here. Now I'm in my personal mode. Like maybe there's more blending between personal and professional. Yeah. And the when isn't so bifurcated. Now I don't know. I'm not a TJ type, but I feel like that's where the boundaries feel really rigid there.
And that's where some introverted feeling or authenticity can come in, is helping create a little bit more of a human experience. But I will say what you're talking about, and you kind of hinted at it before, but I think I want to reinforce it, is using control as a substitute for boundaries.
Yes. Well, I think that's kind of what I'm speaking to.
That's what you're speaking to. Yeah,
like
exactly.
The 9 to 5 workday or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if I can control the situation, then I don't have to have those, like, again, boundaries are permeable and they kind of come in and out, and there's a reevaluation of them at any given moment. And so we have to have some flexibility around it. And control is not the same thing as a boundary. And so oftentimes what control does, though, is actually control is a version of pushing the boundary out even more, right? It's like, and I think it's because of the challenge is that extroverted thinking or effectiveness people, like TJs, know if you get in, like if you've managed to worm your way in, they start caring about you, it's really hard for them to keep their boundaries because they do what the FP types do, which is start going into exception thinking. Because that's what introverted feeling encourages them to do sometimes. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not still really important for the balance. And actually, it's less, I think it's the balance with introverted feeling or authenticity, bringing that in to make it so that as opposed to some people are in the circle of trust and some people are out. Yeah. It's more like humanizing everybody just a little bit, right? Making sure that everybody, you can have that kind of sort of friendly, but not taking responsibility for them. Yes. Because I think what ends up happening is if you're in, so to speak, and you're one of my people, now I feel like I'm responsible for you. Yes. But what if you can still speak to somebody on sort of a human level, but not feel responsible for them, like introverted feeling or authenticity users do? Yeah. Yeah. I think ITJs have a little different, I think we're talking about this almost from like an ETJ, extroverted thinking dominant. I think ITJs, I mean, there may be one or more INTJs right now or ISTJs right now listening to us or watching us, and you keep making exception for yourself, and the things you want to do in the world never get done because you keep letting yourself off the hook. Yeah. Your introverted feeling it doesn't have the proper boundary. And you're like, oh, well, this one, and you let yourself off the hook, and then you're disappointed with yourself because you didn't do the thing you wanted to do or make the impact you wanted to make or build the thing you wanted to build or take the project you wanted to take. And you're sitting here going, yeah, I probably shouldn't give myself so many exceptions. I probably should hold myself to better account. And you might have all the reasons you give yourself exception, but that's that exception thinking that can come in and erode. So we talk about these rigid boundaries, extroverted thinking, but I think there's a lot of extroverted thinking TJ users who don't have rigid boundaries. They let themselves and other people off the hook too much, maybe codependently, right, or whatever. And I think that's another struggle on the other side. Well, and again, FPs and TJs on some level will have sort of the same boundary issues because it's a polarity. And so in the same way that TPs and FJs, they both have the boundary around relationships and around communicate truth and communicating truths, and making sure that that they're not in one-sided relationships, and they're not overgiving, and that they're not entering codependent relationships in that way. Not that FPs and TJs can't enter codependent relationships, but it looks a little different usually. But TPs and FJs have kind of a similar struggle, but almost like the funhouse or the photo negative version of it. And FPs and TJs will have the same thing, and their boundaries are around letting themselves and the people they love off the hook, overly focusing on a single channel and allowing the other channels to be taken advantage of, feeling too much sense of responsibility, right? Like it's their job to make sure that they're setting, that they're stewarding other people's lives for them to some extent, or stewarding their resource management for them, and doing things that are not fulfilling, right? Because they get this responsibility creep going. And I think the other piece is to this, like you mentioned, letting themselves and others off the hook. And the other piece of it is mistaking control for boundaries. Yeah. And I think both FPs and TJs have a tendency to do this.
Yes.
Right. They both have a tendency to go, I have good boundaries, but actually what they're doing is they're like trying to control everything.
Yeah.
Just like I said, sometimes TPs struggle to receive.
Yeah. TJs
also struggle to receive.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that they don't always let people take care of them. And that can be over-boundaried.
I think that's definitely true. So if you're a TJ type and you use effectiveness, ETJ, ITJ, what's your story? What have you struggled with? What have you overcome? What are you still in the midst of? Have you figured some of this out? Have you balanced this with the other side? Do you have overly done boundaries, middle? Are you letting people walk all over you? Are you giving too many exceptions to yourself and others? Like, how do you interpret this for your own life? Love to hear it. Any other comments we want to make as we wrap this up? As far as principles to take with us, things to think about around boundary setting, around boundaries, people?
Yeah. Well, I think 100% of people need to work on boundaries. Yeah. No matter how advanced you are, right? Most of us have boundary issues in some way. Actually, I wouldn't even say boundary issues. I would say all of us need to keep our finger on the pulse of where our boundaries are, because they update all the time, and we're updating all the time. We're changing as people, and especially anybody into growth and development. We need to continually reevaluate where our boundaries are at. And I don't mean on a moment to moment basis and get all stressed out about it and worry about it. But I mean, just check in every once in a while and go, are my boundaries where they need to be? Because the challenge with boundaries is that it's, if we don't have good boundaries, things get really leaky. Yeah. Our energy and our life force gets leaky. And that's if our boundaries are not strong enough. But if our boundaries are too strong, then we're not leaky, but we are missing really important experiences in life. We're missing how much other people can nourish us. And we're missing how rewarding life can be. So we're either too cavalier, playing fast and loose, and we're not protecting ourselves enough, or we're overprotecting ourselves. But in both cases, we're doing ourselves a big disservice. So most of us need to focus on it. And type doesn't tell you necessarily where all your boundaries, it tells us what we're attuned to, what we tend to struggle with, but it won't necessarily tell you which boundaries you need to look at and which you don't. TJs might have relational boundary issues. FPs might have, other people,
truth-telling boundaries.
Yeah, truth-telling boundaries. Yeah, exactly. Like it's all a big mismatch. But this allows us to understand where we're pre-wired to kind of let people off the hook, where we're pre-wired to let ourselves off the hook, where we're some of the compulsions that we tend to deal with and struggle with. So at minimum, it gives us a really good starting point to start to define some of these things for ourselves. Yeah. So we're not necessarily making any sort of prescription on who's going to have what boundary issues, but these are the trends, and these might be places to start with.
Yeah. If you'd like to explore more about your personality type and maybe the boundaries that you would adjust or look at and all the things we talked about here, I encourage you to come over to our website, personalityhacker.com. You can check out all sorts of resources there, articles, blog, podcasts. We've got a ton of products and programs for you too that are really designed to help you live your best life. So we tailor these things to your personality. We've got 16 different owner's manuals for all the 16 different personality types. And it talks about things like getting into flow and helping overcome some of the maybe trauma loops or difficulties that we have. And a lot of times we look at those and we go, there's boundaries that aren't set well. And usually it's about adjusting some of this. There's also a part of you in your personality, that co-pilot or auxiliary cognitive function, and it's different for everybody, but yours is your superpower. It's like this translator between some of the most certain parts of you and some of the most uncertain parts of you. And also it helps you bring out yourself into the world. It helps you round out your personality and grow. And it's really a key place that we can start with growth there. And there's a ton of more information, useful tools in those owner's manuals. And we have a ton of products and programs as well, just beyond those owner's manuals. I would start there if you'd like to explore this further. Again, personalityhacker.com. My name is Joel Markowit.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.